back to Historical American Girl Read-Alouds. Today I'm starting out in the garden with Samantha's garden party furniture. This furniture was made by American Girl and it goes with Samantha's happy birthday story. Her birthday story has them getting bouquets of roses from Grand Mary's Rose Garden, and so it comes with little bouquets of roses. The girls who come to her party also get fans, so there are 2 fans that come with it. The table is kind of an outdoor table, like a wicker table with a tablecloth over it, and it has a really cute pitcher. They had lemonade at her birthday party. The pitcher has little cherries, a cherry design on it. There's little goblets that you would pour the lemonade into, and they have the matching cherries on it, as well as some little dishes that have the cherries on it too. In the story, they have ice cream for her birthday party, and they made ice cream in an old-fashioned ice cream maker. This is the ice cream maker right here. And one cool thing about the ice cream maker is that it actually works. You can actually make ice cream in it. This was also sold with Addie, so it was both Addie and Samantha's ice cream maker. Inside is a little metal tin, and that's where you would put the ingredients for the ice cream. And there's a paddle inside. That paddle will stir all of the ingredients around. The little metal canister goes inside this barrel, but you can see there's some space between the canister and the barrel. And that's where they put ice and rock salt. The ice and rock salt make the ice cream cold as the ingredients are being stirred together. There's a handle that goes on so that they could crank that paddle that was inside the metal canister. And that's what stirs all the ingredients as they're getting cold. And that's how they made ice cream. Also for her birthday, they had little tiny petit fours. Petit fours are tiny little cakes, and they had little candles on them for her birthday. There's also napkins and gold silverware, 2 place settings. And the chairs that they sit on, they're outside wicker furniture. And they have a real pretty little pad with them, a little floral design. Today we'll be reading chapter 5 in Meet Samantha. In our last chapter, Jessie had left forever, and Samantha was so upset, not knowing why Jessie left and having none of the adults being willing to tell her about it. She told Nellie about it, and that's where we're picking up today. This chapter is called Night Visit. The next morning, Samantha brought Lydia to meet Nellie in the tunnel. But when she saw how Nellie's eyes glowed and how gently she touched Lydia's dress, Samantha wondered if she had been wrong to bring the doll. Nellie had never owned a doll, not even a simple doll, and certainly not a doll as beautiful as Lydia. "It's all right if you play with her," Samantha said. "Look, her hat can come off, and her dress even has little buttons." While Nellie cradled Lydia, Samantha told her what had happened. "Jessie left, and nobody will tell me why," Samantha said. Nellie didn't answer. She was buttoning the tiny buttons. "I think I know, though," Samantha continued. "I think she's going to be an actress." Nellie carefully removed Lydia's hat and turned it over in her hand. She'll be famous, Samantha went on, and one day she'll come back here and we'll go to see her, and she'll take you and me to meet all the actors and actresses. Only you and me out of the whole town, because we were her friends. Nellie still had nothing to say. Now she was looking at the doll's tiny leather shoes. In the days that followed, Samantha came up with several reasons for Jessie's leaving. Maybe Jessie had gone to New Orleans with Lincoln to be a singer there. Jessie had a beautiful voice. Or the president might have asked her to be a spy in Europe. She'd sew elegant clothes for kings and queens and learn their secrets. Or maybe her brother had been kidnapped and taken to South America, and Jessie was going to rescue him. Then one day, Nellie had a suggestion. Maybe she's got a baby, Nellie said. Samantha was startled. Why would she do that? Nellie shrugged. Lots of people do. They just like babies, she said. Samantha had to agree. Jessie loves babies. Well then? Samantha was annoyed. Nellie's idea wasn't half as exciting as any of hers, but it was too sensible to be ignored. Why wouldn't Grandmary tell me if it was a baby? Asked Samantha. Nellie shrugged again. Grown-ups don't like to talk about babies coming. Samantha had to agree. I asked Grandmary about babies once, and she said it wasn't a proper subject for young girls. Nellie nodded in understanding. I asked Mrs. Hawkins, and she said the stork brings babies, but she wouldn't talk about it anymore, Samantha continued. I don't think it's true anyway, said Nellie. When my baby sister came, the midwife was at our building. My other sister and I had to go out with my uncle. When we got back, my baby sister was there, and the midwife was fixing tea for my mother. But there wasn't any stork anywhere. Samantha was puzzled. What's a midwife? She asked. She's a lady who visits whenever a new baby comes, Nellie answered. My uncle said she brings the baby in her little black bag. But I looked in, and the bag was full of things like doctors have. There wouldn't be any room for a baby in there. Nellie, we've just got to find out what happened to Jessie, said Samantha. If we just knew where she lived, we could ask Lincoln. He must know where she is. I know where she lives, said Nellie. Samantha's eyes were wide with surprise. You do? Nellie nodded. A woman across the street from Jessie makes an herb tea that cures headaches. One day Mrs. Ryland wanted some, so she sent me home with Jessie to get it. I can show you. Samantha hugged her. Oh, Nellie, that's perfect. Only we can't go in the daytime. They'd stop us for sure. We'll go tonight. When everybody's in bed, I'll sneak down the back stairs and meet you right here in the tunnel. Look out your window and watch my house. Grandmary always turns out the gas lamps just before she goes to bed. That's how you'll know it's all right for me to come down and meet you. Nellie agreed. She knew no one at the Ryland house would even notice if she went out after she had finished her evening chores. So during this time period, they had gas lamps. And so they would turn the gas on and light it. Maybe you have a gas fireplace or a gas stove. They didn't have electricity yet, so they had gas lamps in their house. Samantha had always thought the nighttime was very quiet. But that night, noises seemed to come from everywhere. The crickets were making a terrible racket. The bushes and trees rustled as though they were hiding wild animals, and dogs barked all around. Samantha closed the back door carefully and hurried to the tunnel to find Nellie. The two girls held hands and started out of the yard and up the street. As long as they were on familiar streets where gas lamps glowed with a friendly light, they thought their adventure was grand and very exciting. But after they crossed the railroad tracks, the streets got dark and narrow. The houses were dark too and very small. Somewhere there was loud music and noisy laughter, and once in a while there was shouting. Nellie squeezed Samantha's hand so tightly that Samantha couldn't have let go if she'd wanted to. But she certainly didn't want to. She was just as frightened as her friend was. Maybe we shouldn't have come at all, she thought. But she didn't say that to Nellie. She wanted to be brave. "Are you sure you know the way?" Samantha whispered. I think so." Nellie's voice was shaky. "It's not much farther now." Samantha looked at the drab houses they were passing. Even in the dark, she could tell there wasn't much grass in front, and there was very little room for flowers. "Why does Jessie live here?" she asked. "This is the colored part of town," Nellie answered. "You mean Jessie has to live here?" Samantha asked. Nellie looked at her. Samantha was smart about so many things that Nellie was always surprised at what her friend didn't know. "Yes, of course," Nellie said. "Why?" asked Samantha. "I don't know," Nellie said. "It's just the way grown-ups do things." Her face lit up with relief. "There it is," she said. The soft glow of a kerosene lamp shone from a window, and the girls rushed to the wall beneath it. They huddled there for a minute, panting. "Aren't you going to knock on the door?" Nellie whispered. Samantha suddenly lost her nerve. "What if it's not the right house after all?" she said. "Or what if Jessie went away with Lincoln and somebody else lives there now?" "Well, we could look in the window," said Nellie. "I'll get down and you can get on my back. Then you can see in." "No, I'm stronger," answered Samantha. "You get on my back." Samantha got on her hands and knees. Nellie stepped carefully onto her back. She held tight to the windowsill and looked over. "Oh, Samantha," she whispered. "Jessie's there. And Lincoln, too. And, what? There's a cradle." At just that moment, Jessie looked up. She shrieked at the face she saw peering in at her. Nellie tried to duck, but she lost her balance and fell over, kicking Samantha in the ribs as she went. So it was a tangle of arms and legs and frightened faces that Lincoln found when he came outside the house. He laughed out loud. Inside, Jessie brushed the girls' dresses. "I declare, Miss Samantha, I think I'll spend the rest of my life straightening you up after mischief," she chuckled. "What on earth are you doing here at such a time of night? Where's Hawkins?" The girls looked at one another shyly. Then Samantha spoke. "We came by ourselves, Jessie. We didn't know what had happened to you, and no one would tell us." Jessie's smile melted, and she put her arms around Samantha. "My poor child," she said. "I'm sorry. I never dreamed you'd worry. But you see, I'm fine." She stood back and smiled proudly. "And now come see my treasure." She went to the cradle and lifted out a tiny blanketed bundle. She brought it over to the girls and announced, "This is Nathaniel." Wrapped in the blanket was the tiniest person Samantha had ever seen. His skin was the same fine brown as his mother's, and his head was covered with soft black curls. His cheeks were so round and soft that Samantha couldn't resist reaching out to touch them. When his tiny pink mouth opened and closed, she was sure he smiled at her. "Oh, Jessie," she breathed. "He's beautiful." Jessie beamed and tucked the baby back in his cradle with a kiss. "But you see why I couldn't stay at your grandmother's," she said, turning back to the girls. "Lincoln's gone most of the time working. I've got to be here to take care of Nathaniel. But don't worry, Miss Samantha. I'll come to see you often. And I'll bring Nathaniel too." She hugged Samantha quickly. Then she hustled the girls to the door. "Now Lincoln is going to take you home. If your grandmother finds out you're gone, she'll have your hide, and mine too." The way home seemed much shorter with Lincoln's strong hands to guide them. Nellie and Samantha crept into their houses without making a sound. Samantha tiptoed quickly up the stairs and back into her room. She hurried to unbutton her shoes and take off her stockings. She hung her dress in the tall wooden wardrobe, unbuttoned her underwaist, and slipped her long ruffled nightgown over her head. Her nightgown had never felt so soft and warm. Her bed had never smelled so sweet or been so welcome. She held Lydia very close and fell asleep. And that's the end of that chapter. You can see in the picture there is a wardrobe. In Samantha's time, they didn't usually have built-in closets in their houses, so they kept their clothing in a piece of furniture called a wardrobe, and that's what's showing there in the picture. It mentions Samantha unbuttoning her shoes, and in the Samantha's World book, it talks a little bit about the clothing that they wore during this time. Dressing up. Just like the fashion dolls, wealthy girls and women had many dresses to choose from. A proper woman like Grandmary might have changed her outfit 4 or 5 times a day, depending upon her social schedule. At the turn of the century, girls and women began shopping in the new large department stores. When they strolled by the windows, they saw the latest styles for every social occasion: morning walks, afternoon teas, and evening dinners. Next to the picture of the girl, or underneath the picture of the girl, it says, "Play pinafores." Girls were expected to keep their dresses neat and tidy, so they wore pinafores, or aprons, when they played. The pink dress there, the caption says, "This fancy dress is the same style as a play dress, but it's made of finer fabrics, silk, velvet, and lace." At the bottom, sailor suits and midi dresses were popular in 1904. They often came with a whistle. Loosen up. In 1904, children who didn't have to work had more time to play. Girls wore dresses with roomy blouson tops and dropped waists. And boys started wearing knickers or knee-length pants. Even in the summer, girls and boys wore black cotton stockings and lace-up boots. In the middle, it says fancy footwear. Leather dress boots had so many buttons that a lady needed a tool called a button hook to close them. And so that's what Samantha was talking about in the story when she was unbuttoning her boots. The button hook slipped into the buttonhole, hooked around the button, and brought the button back through. Because the leather of the shoes was really tough, they had to have that tool to kind of help get that button through. Hair bows were worn at the top of the head. The bigger the bow, the better. And Samantha had a bow, but my Samantha's really old and her bow is long gone. I'll have to get a new one sometime. Straw hat and purse. Proper girls rarely went outside without a hat. Straw hats were warm weather favorites. Some even had matching purses. Paying a call. While paying an afternoon call on her society friends, a lady wore a walking suit, or a tailored jacket and skirt with a shirtwaist or blouse. She wore a hat and used long steel pins to fasten it into her upswept hair. Some hats had a veil to shade the face. Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau, or New Art jewelry, was stylish. It had soft colors and shapes from nature. This brooch is in the shape of an orchid. During the day, a lady might wear simple leather gloves with a single button at the wrist. Parasols or sun umbrellas often matched the color or pattern of a lady's dress. In the story, we heard Nellie tell Samantha that Jessie had to live in that part of town that was very run down, and Samantha didn't understand. She was from a wealthy family, so she was very sheltered about things in the world. But at this time, Black people and white people didn't generally live in the same place, and so the Black people in her town were made to live in a certain part for only the Black people, and at that time they called them colored people. So luckily, Nellie knew where Jessie lived and was able to remember how to get there. So the two of them were able to find out that Jessie was okay and that she actually had a wonderful surprise. So Samantha's feeling a little bit better now, I'm sure, knowing about Jessie and seeing cute little Nathaniel. Tune in next time to find out what happens in Chapter 6 of Meet Samantha. See you